Okay, today we'll discuss foundations of group behavior. I think we finished motivation and application of motivation concepts at the workplace. So we're actually done with individual behavior in organizations. We're moving to how is group behavior going to affect, say, work, the norms, the cohesiveness, the performance of groups and teams. So that's what we're going to discuss today. So let's get started. So we have certain learning objectives for this class, distinguish between different types of groups, also discuss the punctuated equilibrium model of group development, show how role requirements change and what kind of roles people play in groups and teams. Also discuss norms and how norms actually affect individual behavior in groups. We'll also discuss the relevance of status and size of the group and how does the size of the group or the status differentials within the group, how do they affect performance. We'll also discuss cohesiveness and diversity and how important is cohesiveness for team performance or group performance, and how integral is diversity to bring out the innovative ideas, the diversity which can support out of the box thinking, and how do they actually affect in a positive way group effectiveness. We'll also discuss the strengths and weaknesses of group decision making, because eventually groups bring in a lot of creativity, different divergent thought process, but they can also sometimes be time consuming. It can be laborious. There can be people who are not contributing as much to teams. Social loafing can be a problem. So there are certain challenges when you try to work with groups and have groups make decisions for you. So we'll begin off with learning objective 1. We want to distinguish what are the different types of groups that we possibly can have within the organization. There are different types of groups. You could have groups that are structured groups, unstructured groups. You can have groups that are virtual groups. You can have groups based on functional proximity, whatever activities that are performed. But broad classification of groups can be formal groups that are necessitated and required by the organization structure. Say, suppose I belong to the finance group. So obviously, I belong to that department where all the finance functions are being done. I also belong to the group where all credentials of group members are pretty similar. I also belong to this finance group because tasks and activities are so focused in the finance field. So obviously, the proximity of the tasks and activities that we perform, the skill credentials that we bring together, and the kind of objectives that we are focused on achieving as a group, that defines a formal group. And that's why I belong to the finance group. I'm just giving a casual example. You could belong to the production team, you could belong to the HR group, you could belong to some other group. And these are all classical examples of formal groups required by the organization structure. And you could have plenty of informal groups. And these are, they're not formally structured. They're not determined by organizations, but you already have a group. Like say, for example, I belong to a group of a few faculty and a couple of, say, staff who share same values, who have similar preferences, styles of working. We like to work in each other's company. We are a very cohesive unit. We are happy to be part of that group. And that's not determined by the organization. It's not formally designated by someone within the organization. It's just emerging out of our value system, our belief systems, our proximity in terms of styles of management, and perhaps the way we look at life. So there's something beyond the organization that can create informal groups, and there are plenty of informal groups, like friendship group, for example. You're 48 students in this class, and I'm sure some of you are really good friends from before this class. So you can stick with that group just because you're good friends. Communication is much easier. You share common values and practices. And therefore, it's much easier for you to, work together, achieve those synergies that are required for group performance. So anything that's not designated required by the formal organization are called as informal groups. Now, all of group activity comes from one theory that we call as social identity theory. This is just explaining why and when individuals consider themselves being integral members of a group. Again, as I was explaining, there could be emotional reactions to the failure or success of their group because of their self-esteem, and how these things can get tied into the performance of the group. Social identities also help us understand who we are and where we fit in with people. Like, say, for example, I was giving you the example of me working with a group of faculty and staff, an informal group. I think that's a sense of social identity, the way we look at life, how we feel about who we are, and what we are supposed to be achieving in life. Not just achieving organizational goals, but the kind of personal fulfillment, the type of person that I am, and the kind of self-actualization that I want to achieve. Perhaps these all resonate with other members of the group, and that gives me this sense of social identity. That can happen in formal groups as well. Like, suppose I belong to the School of Management group. We belong, like we are like a family. Faculty, staff, students, alumni, our networks with industry partners, our executive council. We have other stakeholders. All of us belong to that School of Management family. It's a family of professional friends that gives us this sense of identity. We are proud to be part of the School of Management. We really like the way School of Management creates opportunities for our students, and the kind of quality standards that we set for ourselves in terms of accreditation, for example, and the kind of collaboration that we have for supporting research work, reaching out to students to get them engaged in several activities that the school initiates. So this gives us that sense of identity, so much to the fact that if you succeed, it feels as if we have succeeded. We love to be part of your success stories. So if I have 48 students in my class, and each of you have a story in terms of how successful you have been, both academically and in your careers, I think each of us feel as if we're part of that story. We've contributed in some way, we've supported your efforts, and because you succeed, it just makes us that much more fulfilled and that much more satisfied. And that's the sense of identity, at least me. Like, the way I look at it, suppose you've gone back home and talked about professors, about staff, about other friends who have helped you succeed. And if your family knows a couple of names in faculty, a couple of names in staff, several names among your friends, it's just makes it evident that the group has been effective. You have enjoyed thoroughly being part of that group. You identify yourself with the School of Management. And that is why you have those lovely stories, anecdotes that you want to share, which have contributed to your success. So social identity is something that brings people together. And it also defines who we are in the larger frame of a group. In groups versus out groups. This is an interesting thing. I know, in-group favoritism, it's there on the slide, but every organization, every department, every formal groups that are formed by the organization structure eventually have certain in-groups versus out-groups. So in-group is that which is very close to the leader, and the members see themselves as being better than the other people. A secret between you and me, I'm that in-group member. I know it sounds weird when I say that to you, but I have access to information which other faculty or staff might not have. Or at least I have, early access to such information that other faculty and staff might have late access to such information. Any decisions that are going to happen 6 months later, I kind of have access to them now, even before they have got formally announced, because I believe I'm part of that in-group. It's a key thing for all of you guys to work out your way into the in-group, because you're preferred over the other group members for sharing information, for giving you additional responsibilities, for making you feel more significant, for getting you involved with planning activities, higher order decision-making activities. All this, you're the preferred choice because you belong to the in-group. So group dynamics are very, very interesting. How many of you think you're part of the in-group which at places you work. Does anybody have that experience? Belonging to the in-group, having first access to information, getting preference over the other members in terms of getting extra responsibilities, better chances of performance, better chances of recognition, growth opportunities within the company. Does anybody have such kind of experience? No? Okay, I'm not going to push you to talk, but I think you should be part of in groups. And the out group, obviously, is someone else outside of the in group, and they're usually an identified group known by the in groups members. I can clearly tell you who is the out group members, say in the School of Management, easily. I wouldn't do that, of course, because that's not my way of functioning. And confidentiality is something that's important, but I would know who is part of the in group and who are the special members there in the in group versus who are just the other members. They're good, they're capable, they're equally skilled and credentialed, but definitely they're not going to have access to the latest and the greatest information possible. They're not going to get the first, cut in terms of responsibilities, additional responsibilities, and greater significant decision-making power. They're not going to be part of that. Such members are the out group. It can happen in every organization. To try and belong to the in-group, you need special skills, not just technical skills, not just, skills that you get from learning and from taking up, courses or getting some degrees and diplomas, but skills that are more interpersonal and skills that let you succeed in a social setting like a group. Social identity threat. Now, in groups and out groups also bring this possibility you might have a social identity threat. Stereotyping can be possible. The out group members will say, oh, you guys are given a lot of importance. You are the favorites and you have the, preference over the other members. That kind of stereotyping can happen. Individuals also can believe they will be personally negatively evaluated if they belong to, say, an out group, for example. And they can be, because the out group sometimes can perceive themselves as being devalued, not being given as much preference. They might be feeling that they are let out from the whole discussion, that they're not engaged as much. And obviously they can lose their confidence and the performance can go down. So that's the kind of social identity threat. It happens mostly in all organizations. That's the disadvantage. If you belong to the out group, you might feel as if you're ostracized, you're being undermined, you're not engaged as much, you're not given the most important tasks and responsibilities, and therefore you don't have equal opportunities to be performing or to get recognized. And obviously your performance is going to suffer because of lack of self-esteem because you belong to the out group. That's definitely possible. Now, this is some theory which I think applies to all of us. It's called the punctuated equilibrium model. Now, all of you're doing group projects, right? In the Management 370 course, you're doing the group project. So for example, what your professor did was to arrange you in groups. That's your first meeting. I'll put you in breakout rooms as well. So that's your first meeting. At point A, this is time initially during the first 2-3 weeks of the semester. I'll put you in a group. Then I organize some breakout rooms so that you get to know each other, share your email addresses, understand what the group assignment is all about. And then you're also determining who is going to do what and how are you going to meet and what's the importance of each of those activities that you will perform as individuals as much as you're accountable as a group. So that's your first meeting. Breakout room 1, breakout room 2, this is your first meeting. But what happens after that? The performance doesn't increase. It's just flat. So most of you, I think, perhaps are here. Like you've reached halfway through your semester. I mean, 22nd is our midterm. So I'm assuming we have reached exactly midway of our semester. And where are you in terms of your group project? You have not made any progress. I'm just assuming. I know some of you are working. Some of you have created a document. You've shared your ideas. You're beginning to create a model for your Management 370 group project. You're trying to write your hypothesis. Some of you have been lucky. You found a questionnaire. You found the data sets. Some of you are struggling to open the data sets because SPS is not installing on your laptops, all kinds of problems. But then your performance is pretty much flat. When you reach the halfway mark, suddenly you begin to realize, oh man, we are losing time. So this transition, so it's like as if there is an equilibrium. You're not doing much till half of the semester, and suddenly there is heightened activity. Suddenly you realize, man, I have to do some catching up to do. We have to work together. We need to get this sorted out. We are just halfway through the semester. If we don't act now, we are going to be left out. We're going to be, late on work, completing the work itself, and then we'll be in trouble. We don't want to lose points as a group. So heightened activity, the performance has a spurt. It increases. The level of performance increases at the midway mark. And then strangely, again, you take a break. You go slow, you have midterm exams, other courses, other assignments, blah, blah, blah. And then you actually make it just as flat. The performance has increased, has a lot achieved in terms of, say, finding the data set, creating the hypothesis, creating the model, at least beginning to write the review of literature on the hypothesis. You've done that. And suddenly you take a break because there are other courses, other distractions, other assignments, other midterm exams. You again have a flat curve in terms of performance, which is taken on the y-axis. But towards the end of the semester, maybe 3 weeks before the end of the semester, there's again an increase in activity. You're trying to finalize the report. This is the increase in activity, the small increase. You're trying to, refine the first draft, clean it up, rewrite some parts of it, add some references, make it look clean, write to the professor and say, can you have a look? Do you think we need to add something, or is it perfectly okay? And can we submit our assignment on Canvas? And once I say yes, that's where you complete your project report. And that's the end of the time period, which is B. So this is a punctuated equilibrium model. We all are like that. Suppose we are a School of Management team of 4 members. We are doing an activity. We take a couple of days, a couple of weeks, perhaps to think about it. And towards the midterm, midpoint of our deadline, that is when the 4 members come together. Oh, we have to work. Let's have more meetings. Let's discuss more because we have to finish the task. Otherwise, we're going to be held accountable. Will not look good. We'll start working as professors, and then we achieve a lot. And somehow we take a little phase where we don't do much because we have other projects, other assignments, other responsibilities. Then again, towards the end of the deadline, we start working. We clean up the first draft. We make a second draft. We share it with everyone. We have a review meeting. We have a third draft. And now we're happy and we're ready to submit our work to our boss. That's completion. So this is what we call as the punctuated equilibrium, because there's an equilibrium to begin with, there's heightened activity, there's another second equilibrium, phase 2, then there is some more activity towards the completion. We are good to go. We finish the task. So the punctuated equilibrium model apparently is always there. So if I gave you 1 semester, you will do the same thing. If I gave you 30 days to finish, you will do the same thing. This is how human beings work in groups and teams. Okay. So I hope you're able to reflect it in the group dynamics of your own team. Now we're going to this next objective, learning objective for today's class is how role requirements change. Now I think I've actually I'll explain this to you using a whiteboard. Let's see if that helps. So, it's like this. When you have certain jobs, you do activity 1, you do activity 2, 3. These are your responsibilities as a job. You have responsibility 1, responsibility 2, responsibility 3, responsibility 4. That's your job. But roles are definitely bigger than your job. So obviously roles can be, you're a leader sometimes, you're a team member sometimes, you're playing the role of a negotiator sometimes, you're playing the role of a researcher sometimes, you're playing the role of a harmonizer sometimes. So we play different roles, and within the group, you play different roles. You sometimes are negotiating because you're managing conflict. You sometimes can be a very active team member. You're participating, contributing. Sometimes you're leading the group. You're trying to tell team members, we're losing time. This is the focus that we should have. Can we start working? Can we assign responsibilities, hold each other mutually accountable? Sometimes you're a researcher because you want to get more information, more data. Sometimes you harmonize, putting it together, creating that report, creating the presentation. So obviously there are different role expectations and role perceptions. So the key important thing is, do you have clarity in your roles? That's the key. Do you clearly understand what are your role expectations? What roles are you supposed to be playing? So there are expected roles. This is important. And your own perceptions, perceived roles. In my perception, what do I think I should be playing? What roles should I have? So the expectations must match perceptions. Then obviously there is what we call as role clarity. So likewise, in your house, what are you supposed to be playing? Are you a parent? Are you a brother? Are you a sister? Are you a student? What roles do you play at home? See, I'm still a son to my mom. I'm a husband to my wife. I'm a father to my kids. So obviously, I'm playing several roles at home as well. But do I know what everybody expects? What my mother expects? What my family expects? What my children expect? And what do I perceive as being the right role to play? So your expectations from your colleagues, from members of the team, and your own perceptions of what roles you must take and accept, and you're capable of performing those roles. Those expectations must match with perception of my roles that I think I should be playing. And if you have that, then you have what is called as role clarity. But if you don't have any of these, I mean, your expectations are different, your perceptions are different, others' expectations of you are different from your own perceptions of your roles that you have to be playing. And then that is where you have something called as role conflict. My boss expects something else, but I think I should be doing this. My perception of my role is different from my boss's expectations. My perception of my roles are different from my team members' expectations. Then you have a problem. You have a role conflict. That's what is meant by role conflict, where there is no clarity. There's ambiguity, there is confusion, and that can create problems. If my family expects some time, if my children expect some time from me, and I'm just bothered about research and teaching and consulting and administration and my promotion opportunities at the university, and I'm just simply ignoring my family, I'm ignoring my kids, it's very sad. I'm not able to perform roles in my family, of a parent, of a sibling, of a son. Those can be a problem. So it's a wonderful topic to discuss, whether roles are important at the organizational level, roles are important at the family level, roles are important at the society level, community level. So understanding roles is extremely important within group dynamics as well. So I'm going to go back to my slides. Hopefully I'll explain that again. Here you go. So role perception, one's perception of how to act in a given situation, that's your perception, expectation of how others believe one should act in a given situation. And it's a psychological contract you have with others. Every day, I don't sign a contract with my spouse, with my wife, or with my kids, but it's a psychological given that I'm going to play my role as a father, as a husband, as a family person, and support their progress and provide for their well-being, protect their interests, safeguard their rights, and give them the freedom that they deserve. So those are expectations versus perception, and this is a psychological contract that you have. You don't have a written contract, but it's more of a psychological contract. So roles are extremely important within groups. Let's go off here. What's going on? Okay, role conflict, as I explained, situation in which an individual faces divergent role expectations. And you might have inter-role conflict as well. How can I play two different roles at the same time? That can happen, especially if you belong to separate groups and those groups are, opposing each other. So how do I play those two different roles? And I might have a conflict. And then these are not the easy situations. Again, we can go after another thing that affects individual behavior in groups, which are called as norms. What are the acceptable standards of behavior? What are the acceptable standards of language, appearance, of performance? What's accepted standards of performance within a group? Those are norms. This is not acceptable in terms of behavior. This is not acceptable in terms of language. This is not acceptable in terms of how you dress up, how you look in a group. These are not accepted in terms of performance levels. So norms can be not just to behavior, but to language that you use, appearances that you bring, and performance expectations of others. Norms can be set for a group. Guys, you should do this. When you work in groups, you could say, oh, academic integrity, we will not compromise. We'll make sure that we write this project ourselves. We'll not indulge in unethical practices that will compromise on academic integrity of our work. You can set up norms. Each of us will contribute certain portion of the project itself. And you can set up that norm. Each person is responsible. Set a norm in terms of time, quality, research. You can set up norms. And you can also set up norms for minimum performance standards in terms of report, in terms of presentation of the report. So you can set norms for yourself. Norms are extremely important in group scenarios. Norms and emotions, there is this research, recent studies have found that when you're talking of groups, individual emotions are influenced by group emotions. And obviously it's true. Suppose if the whole group is positive, upbeat, enthusiastic, we also feel good about it. We feel, I want to belong to this group because there are positive vibes here. So there is research which shows that our individual emotions are influenced by group emotions as well. So, and then there are other things. Like researchers have also found that norms dictated the experience of emotions for individuals and for the groups. In other words, people grew to interpret their shared emotions in the same way. So norms also will determine how groups react in terms of emotions. So the entire group's emotions, are governed by the kind of norms. We belong to one group, we are one group, so we act in a particular way because norms have that kind of influence on how we look at experiences, how we look at what happens to us at the workplace. Norms and culture, and we have different kinds of culture that we talked about. Hofstede's framework, individualistic cultures versus say collectivistic cultures. So individualistic cultures have different norms, collectivistic cultures have different norms. And of course, there are these cultural differences that can be influenced by the norms itself. Yeah. Status. Now, suppose I have a group which has high-ranked, individuals belong to that particular group. If I have the provost talking to us in a group, that status differential has a huge impact. So the provost can make decisions, can take decisions which are far beyond what a faculty like me can take decisions on. And obviously they can participate more. They have a complete understanding of what goes on in the university because I have the provost in the team. But without the provost, perhaps our decision-making is restricted. Our ability to discuss other things beyond that particular group members is restricted. So obviously a high-ranking position person, when they belong to a particular group, because they have more power, their ability is way beyond, they can contribute substantially to the group's progress. And so status definitely has an impact on group performance. Status and norms, high status individuals have more freedom to deviate from norms because they are high status. They'll say, no, we don't have to be worried about this. We can do something because they bring in that high status. Their power is more, their ability to influence is higher, so they can break certain norms. They don't want to destroy all the norms of the group, but they'll say, that's fine. I'll permit you to do this. Status and group interaction, high status people, talk more, they're more assertive, they can take decisions. So obviously that's clear. Status inequity, perceived inequity creates disequilibrium and can lead to resentment and corrective behavior. So obviously if a high ranking person is there in my team, I don't feel comfortable sometimes. I feel that this high status person is taking all the decisions. So what's my role here? Even if I say something, it doesn't really get taken as being seriously important. So I might feel, sidelined, and I kind of perceive this inequity. It can happen because you have high-ranking people in the group. Group size. Now, how does actually size, get affected, and how is it related to, say, status? Large groups are good for gaining diverse input, definitely, sure. Smaller groups are better for doing something with some sort of input. So if you're dealing with a very complex problem, groups with large groups are to be involved. Suppose we are redesigning the mission and vision and values of, say, an institution. That cannot be done by a few people. It should be a large group discussion across the board, across the entire organization. And obviously it means, we're now bringing it down and taking inputs from a larger group, because it's about mission. It's about redefining the vision. We're thinking about the future course of the company itself. So large group discussions are key. And of course, then you can bring it down to smaller groups if possible. Social loafing, the tendency for certain individuals not to work, not to contribute as much, to expend less energy and less effort. And they want to take the benefits of belonging to a group. I can belong to a group and not do much. I just take the benefits of belonging to that group, but I don't contribute as much. That's a classical example of social loafing. I'm sure in your teams, you find people who have to be encouraged to participate. So either because they are shy, either because they have certain, let's say, technical issues, they're not able to connect, they're in remote locations. You have to create opportunities, be more flexible, be more accommodating, encourage them to talk and participate. They're smart people. You just have to let them know that they are smart and their inputs are valued so that they can participate. You don't want somebody to expend a little less effort, because that's going to affect your group performance. If your group performance has to be high, get everybody to participate equally. Let them be engaged and involved. In that case, everybody's contributions are valued and everybody is bringing in some sense of innovation and diversity to the group activity. So obviously it will reflect in the kind of ideas that you have generated and the quality of reports that you're creating. Another very important element of group dynamics is cohesiveness. How attractive is the group? How much attractive is it to all members of the group? Do you want to belong to that group? So obviously cohesiveness is such an important thing. If you're a very strong cohesive group, you would like to talk, you would like to interact, you have greater amount of trust, and the way you synergize and you complement each other and you appreciate the differences amongst yourself, that's much more stronger. And you achieve, and it shows up in the quality of work and the quality of results that your group can produce. It's because you're a cohesive group. You're great friends and you trust each other that much. So obviously you're looking at how norms will affect cohesiveness in groups and how cohesiveness and norms interact with each other in terms of producing better quality or better productivity. So high cohesive groups with high performance norms definitely produce high productivity, result in greater productivity. They're efficient, they're effective, they achieve much more and better quality. So high cohesive groups with high performance norms are very, very productive. But high cohesive groups with low norms, low expectations. If the boss has very low expectations, they have very, very low productivity. It's dangerous. High cohesive teams are extremely dangerous, because if you give them the positive induction, set high performance norms, they can be very, very effective and very efficient. But if you don't set high performance norms, you don't give them the positive induction, they can be low in terms of productivity. But low cohesive teams or groups with high performance norms, still they're only going to be moderately productive because they're low on cohesiveness. And low cohesive teams with low performance norms still will produce only moderate results in terms of efficiency and effectiveness because they are low cohesiveness, because low cohesive groups anyways are going to be moderately productive. But high cohesive teams, give them the right kind of push, the right kind of induction, set high performance norms, extremely high productive. But if you don't do that, they can go really worse than the low cohesive teams. They will not be moderate. They'll hit a rock bottom. They'll go low productivity. Did I discuss the scatter study in one of my classes? The pitchfork study or the scatter study, did we discuss that?
I don't think we did.
Okay, in that case, I can just explain this whole matrix using the pitchfork study. I'll show that off on the whiteboard. So if you, yeah, I can go back here. So it's like this. You talk in terms of say time on the x-axis and performance on the y-axis. You know, when you're working in groups, the productivity generally increases over time. As the time increases on the x-axis, the productivity keeps increasing. It doesn't increase at an increasing rate. After a while, it, you know, the level of increase decreases and it plateaus. This is the norm. That's the normal behavior of teams. As time, you know, elapses, your performance generally increases, but it doesn't keep increasing to infinity. It at some point of time, it hits a plateau. It normalizes. That's the norm. But if you talk of a high cohesive team and you give them some positive induction, this is a high cohesive team, and you're giving them positive induction, the performance bumps. That's why it's the bump. Okay. But the same high cohesive team, if they're negatively induced, this is a high cohesive team, but they have negative induction, the performance drops drastically. So high cohesive teams are like a ticking time bomb. They're very highly cohesive. They're happy to be as a team. They like each other. They share values. They have great amount of communication and trust. It's key that you have to give them positive induction. If you give them negative induction, they're gone. The productivity drops. It's not even equal to the normal. It's just way below the normal. They hit here. But if you talk about low cohesive teams and positive induction, the increase is there, but it's moderate. And low cohesive teams with negative induction, this is low cohesive teams and negative induction. Even the drop is moderate. So the low cohesive teams, the deviation is not so drastic. With positive induction, marginal increase. With negative induction, a marginal decrease. But high cohesive teams are the opposite. With positive induction, huge bump in performance. And with negative induction, huge drop in performance. This study is called as the scatter study, or it's also sometimes referred to as the pitchfork study, because it's like a fork. So they're studying time, how time elapses, and performance on the y-axis. Is that clear? So I explained the same matrix using a diagram to explain the relationship between high cohesiveness, positive induction, and how performance increases. So when you have high cohesive teams, make sure you have the positive induction. It could be leadership, it could be group rewards, it could be setting up high performance norms. Positive induction can be anything. Okay, it can be great leadership. It can be group incentives that the team members really value, or it could be setting high performance norms. Just that sense of identity, the significance, and the final outcome for the organization. That's how you can do it. So high cohesive teams, you need to handle them really carefully. Let's go back here and continue. So that's about cohesiveness and the pitchfork study or the scatter study. Yeah, group decision making. So I think we've discussed this maybe in some other chapter. It's not a bad thing to go over them again. What is the strength of group decision making? Obviously, there's a lot of information, a lot of data, because it's a group of people involved. Probably they belong to different departments, so they're bringing in diverse information and knowledge, increased diversity in terms of which cultures they belong, which departments do they belong, which functional area they serve. So there's diversity in skill, technology, in culture, in experience. So that's a great strength. Increased acceptance of solutions, because when you make a decision as a group, it's not my decision versus your decision. It's not about X or Y individual. It's about us as a group. It's us as a team. So the buy-in to those decisions, the commitment to those decisions is very strong. Now, there could be weaknesses of group decision making, can be very time consuming. That's happening right now. We have so many Zoom meetings and not much is accomplished. There's so much of time consumed in group decision making that individuals can work faster, time consumed is much lesser. And those are, disadvantages of group decision making. Conformity. Sometimes because the group is so strong, they can influence my individual approach to a particular problem. Conformity, I have to comply and conform to the group, otherwise they'll throw me out of the group. They'll socially ostracize me. I have to conform with the group. If I want to continue to belong to the group, there is this pressure from the group itself. Dominance of a few members. Sometimes, certain people talk too much. They control the discussion, the direction of the discussion itself. They dominate these groups, and it's not the best thing. Ambiguous responsibility, who is supposed to do what? When we have a group and we say it's a group responsibility, maybe it'll take more time because we are not surely able to say he or she or somebody is supposed to be doing this. So that sense of ambiguity is there, and responsibility, who is doing what at the end of the day, because it's group. They'll say, it's the group, it's not me. So people can hide away from their responsibilities, because accountabilities take time to be, you clearly defined. So those could be the disadvantages of group decision making. Again, continuing with that, effectiveness, efficiency of group decisions, it can be more accurate. Speed can be slow, creativity can be more, acceptance can be higher, because commitment, involvement is there. That could be pretty much there. I just talked about this groupthink and group shift. Now, groupthink is a situation in which group pressure for conformity exists. They can all apply pressure and they can get Prabhakar to agree. Because if everyone in the school is agreeing to doing something, how am I going to be different? How am I going to say something completely contradicting? I cannot survive in a school like that. So I'm sometimes forced to conform, and that's a disadvantage. Group shift, a change between a group's decision and individual decision that a member within the group could make. Because it's a group decision, they also say, Prabhakar, your individual decision is not going to work here. And an initial decision, they will stick to that decision because it's a group decision. How do you make group decision making more effective? There are many ways of doing it. One very important way of starting group decision making process is brainstorming. It's a freewheeling session where everybody is encouraged to give ideas. I think brainstorming is a great technique. Osborne, he created this technique, and it's a wonderful way of starting every group decision and making exercise. Because in a brainstorming session, the group leader states the problem, and everybody has a chance of giving ideas, suggesting their approaches. No criticism is allowed in this particular session, because if you start criticizing, you're not getting as many ideas. This stage is called ideation. The phase is called as ideation phase. Generate as many ideas. There's no good idea, no bad idea. All ideas are welcome. And that's the first phase of brainstorming. And then obviously at the second level, we're going into looking at the advantages and disadvantages of each of those ideas, looking at viability, feasibility of each of those ideas. What ideas can be top priority? What ideas can be a later priority? The priority list can be made. All this happens at the later phase. But the first phase is you want as many ideas, because one idea could trigger off other ideas, and you're thinking outside the box. The more the merrier. So encourage as many ideas at the ideation phase. The second phase is the evaluation phase. You evaluate all the ideas in terms of viability, marketability, mission centrality, feasibility, financial feasibility. You look at all that, list all the pros and cons of each of those approaches, and then the whole group can decide what is the best approach moving forward. Then there's another way of supporting group decision making. It's called the nominal group technique. The nominal group technique brings all the group members together to be there physically present. But the best part of the nominal group technique is you still have this individual ability to generate your own approach, to also give your ideas. So it permits the group to meet formally, but does not restrict independent thinking. So, sometimes I think nominal group technique is really better than brainstorming, because the method is this way. Each member independently writes down his or her ideas on the problem. After the silent period, each member presents one idea to the group. The ideas are discussed for clarity, more detail, and the kind of impact it can create. Each group member rank orders these ideas. So it's a group still, but each member is able to act independently, because you can write your ideas regarding the problem. You can present your ideas to the group. These are discussed for more detail, more clarity, pros and cons, and the impact that it can create. Then each of you rank order those ideas, your ideas versus all the members' ideas, the idea with the highest aggregation. If you do poll everywhere, or for example, something like that, the words become larger aggregates. Those key ideas become the biggest words on the screen. So that can be done. The idea with the highest aggregate ranking determines the final decision. Suppose we have 10,000 great ideas of how our mission or vision should look like moving forward. But the largest ideas, when you start polling them, and the ideas which is similar are grouped together, the 5 or 6 most important words, buzzwords, they could determine our mission, vision, or campaign statement moving forward. So that's the best part of nominal group method, and it definitely has an advantage over the brainstorming method. We're going back to the last part of our class today, implications. Why do we discuss group dynamics, and why is it important to discuss groups in terms of organizational behavior? Is because groups can definitely impact kind of performance, effect of synergy, get out the best levels of innovation, help us solve complex problems which individuals cannot. And therefore, we have to pay a very strong attention to the different roles that individuals are expected to play or perceive themselves to be playing. We got to make sure we resolve role conflict. We make clarity. We have to provide clarity in roles that people are expected to play in groups. We got to understand the kind of influence group norms have on group performance. We should also understand cohesiveness. How attractive is the group, the level of trust, and the impact of positive induction and cohesiveness on group performance. We should also understand how the group is likely to behave in terms of, say, groupthink or group shift, and how do norms have an impact in group decision making, and say the size of the group, what does it have an impact in group decision making and group performance. Status differential, people who belong to a different status, how do they interact more, they have higher influence, they can sway the discussion in one direction, they can achieve more sometimes, they can facilitate faster action sometimes. So how do status differentials impact group dynamics? How do the size of the group itself impact group decision making? So we are always interested in that. And also we need to understand how to decrease the possibility of deviant workplace activities. Groups can also be antisocial. Groups, can be dysfunctional. So you have the flip side of groups. You have groups that can gang up together and disrupt work. You have to pay attention to status differences. As I said, that groups with high status differences are likely to inhibit input. If you have people, too much of a status difference within the group, it's not going to be really motivating for low status people to interact, participate, contribute. But groups which have very small, low status difference, Yeah, and you perhaps cannot achieve much, but at least you will interact enough. Larger groups for fact finding, smaller groups for action taking tasks. If you have a large group, they take a long time to do something, but they bring you a lot of ideas, a lot of data. But if you want to achieve something quick, you have to have a small task group. So, between large and small groups, you can decide what's the best for you. To increase employee satisfaction, make certain people perceive their job roles, even team roles, group roles. That's important. Roles are very important. So we just finished off this chapter. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.